Hello and welcome to day 7 of our Novena of Grace here at Divine Mercy. Perhaps some of you could be a person like me, and that is, I often, when perhaps I meet another person or I see them, or I hear them saying something or seeing them do something, for whatever reason, almost like my first reaction can be one of criticism. It may not express itself in words, but within myself, I feel that critical disposition. We could say being judgmental. I remember once when I was on this program in the Jesuits for final vows, I was in the Philippines, and I had to take this bus from the capital city of Manila way up to the northern part of the country in the mountain province to a town called Banaue. And so the bus ride is about between 25 and 30 hours. It's a long bus ride. And I remember seeing this young couple, this young man and woman. They were from Europe, and they were going to Banaue. And from their appearance, I had formed over the 25 to 30 hours sort of a narrative in my mind. And the narrative was extremely critical of them in their appearance, especially, and I would draw then an interpretation, and I would form a judgment within my mind and within my heart. And so when we finally reached the town of Banaue, in a sense, after 25 to 30 hours, I had written these two off. And then I went to the rectory, and when we got to Banaue, it was very early in the morning, say like 12:30 a.m. or 1 a.m. And so the parish priest picked me up and brought me back to the rectory, and of course, having a quick sleep and getting up for the morning mass. And so it was just a few hours of sleep, and then getting up to go to mass. And I remember processing into the church. And it was during the Filipino Novena, Simbang Gabi, before Christmas, and so the church was packed. And so I process in, I reverence the altar, I go up behind the altar, and I kiss it, I adore it, Christ in the assembly of the people. And then when I lift my head up and I looked out at the congregation, at the very front, I saw this young man and this woman, this young couple, that I had spent the previous 25 to 30 hours of criticizing them in my mind, and even sort of writing them off about what's wrong in the world today, what's wrong with young people today. And so when I saw them, I sort of chuckled to myself in that, okay, God, I understand. Don't judge a book by its cover. I understood that impulse within me to be too quick to criticize or to form a judgment negative of others. Or another story from the same program. I remember there were two of us, two Jesuits, assigned for 3 weeks in this place called Smoky Mountain. And it's outside Manila, and it's the garbage dump. And people live near and in the garbage dump so that they could scavenge different things to sell. And one of the big things that people would scavenge would be wood. They would take the wood and they would slowly burn the wood to form charcoal and sell the charcoal. And so my ministry for these 3 weeks was to go to this little center and to have a little class in English with young people. And I remember in this class, there was one student. This one student I wasn't overly impressed with. Every time she came to class, she was a little dirty. She had dirt on her face or on her clothing or what have you. And so within myself, again, too quick to judge, I sort of took that as a personal insult, not showing the respect of the class or of the teacher. And then one class, I remember as I was probably boring them to death, I could see that she had fallen asleep. And for me, again, I took it as a personal insult. I'm sure I was insecure about my lack of teaching ability, and so when a student was asleep, I took it personally. And I knew her name, so I called her name and asked her to answer the question I had just asked. Of course, she was asleep, and so she didn't know the question I had asked. But I just didn't let it go. I kept repeating, asking her to answer the question. And that sense of, well, if she had fallen asleep, if she had shown disrespect to me, well, I was going to get her back. And through that embarrassing experience of not being able to know the question, let alone provide an answer, well, then she'd stay awake next time. That's the logic in my head. And then after class, later that day or what have you, I was tied in a conversation with one of the people at the center. And it was they weren't aware that she had fallen asleep or that I had sort of singled her out with regard to this question. But they just began to talk about some of the students, and then they came to this one student in particular. And they told me how much she loves going to the class. That is, how much she loves learning a little bit of English, even if it's just 3 weeks. And they told me that she so loves it that her family, she is required to do this chore every morning to help them make charcoal. And so she would get up at 2, 3 in the morning, and she would work making charcoal for these 7 hours. And in making charcoal, well, we know what that's like. If we ever use it for like a barbecue, it's black and it makes our hands, or if it gets on our skin or our clothing, it makes us dirty. And then why she fell asleep? Well, she fell asleep because she'd already been up for 7, 8 hours. So she'd finish her work, run to the class, and learn a little bit of English. And so clearly my response to her previously, and that criticism that I had of her, that judgment I had formed of her, again, I didn't know the context of her life. I didn't know why these things were as they were. And so then, what can we learn from this, from my mistakes? St. Ignatius of Loyola has this teaching in the spiritual exercises. He calls it the 22nd annotation, or the 22nd note. And paraphrasing what he wrote there, he essentially encourages the person to give another person the benefit of the doubt. That don't do what I did in terms of rushing to that negative judgment, but rather to give a person and what they say or do the benefit of the doubt. We don't know, of course, the context. We don't have all the information of why they're saying or doing what they're saying or doing. But even more so, there's a more important point, there's a more important reason to give a person the benefit of the doubt. That is, we give a person the benefit of the doubt because we seek to see the person as God sees them. When God looks upon each of us, what does he immediately see? Do you think our God immediately sees all our faults and failings? Do Do you think God looks upon us and immediately just sees all the things that should be different? Is that what God the Father sees when God the Father looks upon his child? I don't think so. I think when God the Father looks upon his child, it's not the faults or failings or the things that should be different, but rather God the Father sees the apple of his eye. He sees the one for whom he has given his only begotten Son. He sees the one he eternally, infinitely loves. This isn't a denial of our faults and failings, but it's not, I believe, what God the Father immediately sees. Rather, he sees his beloved child, his beloved son or daughter. Just think about yourself. Think about that person in your life that you love the most. And maybe think you haven't seen them in a little while. And maybe you're walking down the sidewalk and you look ahead maybe 100 feet or so, and you see them coming to you in your direction. When you see them, what happens? Well, chances are you have a smile from ear to ear. Within yourself, in your own heart, you can feel that experience of the love of the person. Your excitement, your enthusiasm, it rises. You are so happy to see them. You are so overjoyed to see them. You don't see them 100 feet away and say, gosh, I wish they ate with their mouth closed. Or, I wish they liked the Toronto Maple Leafs instead of the Montreal Canadiens. Or I wish they were like this or like that. That's not what we see. We see the person we love. And so with God, it is similar. It's not the faults and failings, doesn't deny them, but it's not what he immediately sees. He sees the apple of his eye. He sees his son or daughter. He sees you. And so this is why St. Ignatius gives us this 20-second annotation, in a sense paraphrasing, to give a person the benefit of the doubt and their own interpretation of what they're saying or doing. Again, this isn't from the book of proper manners, but rather it's our participation in the life of God. And in that participation in the life of God, it's seen as God sees. And related to this is how one sees themselves. Oftentimes, though I'm sure there are exceptions, a person who is hypercritical of others is often hypercritical of themselves. I remember this person I once knew years ago. They were so critical of others, you knew when they opened their mouth, something negative was going to come. And so as a consequence, well, you tried to avoid them, or at least avoid conversations with them, because you knew they're going to be critical of oneself or someone else. But I remember at church once, they were reading and they made a mistake. And it was no big deal. I probably didn't even realize at the time. But I remember their reaction. That is, that they turned to me and they just kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And it was such a small mistake. No big deal. Most people wouldn't even have been alerted to it. But they were so critical, so hard on themselves. And so you can see that self-critical attitude they had of themselves, how that then comes from their heart out to being critical of others around them. And so then, what do we do? Well, we have this teaching of St. Ignatius, the 22nd annotation, to give people the benefit of the doubt. And underlying that is a spiritual disposition. And the spiritual disposition is a grace that we can pray for. Maybe we ask God that we may see this other person who tends to get under our skin. But maybe we pray that we may see this other person as God sees them. Not just a person that gets under our skin, but the person who is the apple of God the Father's eye. And likewise with ourselves. If we so dislike ourselves, we're so critical of ourselves, again, pray and ask for the grace. Father, grant me the grace that I may see myself as you see me. I see myself as just a whole collection of things that are wrong. Gosh, I wish I were different. I wish I could be pleasing to you, God. But Father, let me see myself as you see me. Well, he doesn't see any of the stuff I just mentioned. He sees the apple of his eye. He sees the one he loves so much that the Father gave his only begotten Son. He sees his beloved child. He sees his beloved Son. He sees you. And so today then, on the seventh day of the Novena, the 22nd annotation of St. Ignatius, to give people the benefit of the doubt in what they say or what they do, not to be so enthusiastic like I can sometimes be in being critical of them in my mind and heart, of forming a judgment against them, even though God says, do not judge. But there's a spirituality underneath that. It's not just about polite manners, rather it's about participating in the life of God, of participating in God's vision. And so we pray that we may see others as God sees them, and even understand them through God's heart. And likewise, with regard to ourselves, we do the same thing. Father, grant that I may see myself as you see me, and that I may understand myself as you do. God bless, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 8 of the Novena of Grace. God bless.